Well, hello everybody. What is today? Today is the 25th of September, I guess, and it will be, well, into October before this video gets up, but I'm harvesting my squash today, so I thought I would show you those. The first three that you see over here, the darker orange ones, those are Hokkaido pumpkin, or also called red curry squash. I only had 2 plants, but that's all I got was those 3 squash off of it. The next group is the golden nugget squash. All summer long I've been saying they are in the buttercup squash family. Well, they're not. They're in the Hubbard squash family, not the buttercup squash family. I don't know why I had that idea. How I found out is I had to go back to the seed catalog because I was wondering about the size. They're small. Well, some very small. This one in here is, what, softball size, I guess. And then that probably weighs about a pound. They're quite heavy and they've got a lot of nice flesh inside. And that's probably a 2 to 3 pound size. And there's one back there that might be 3 to 4 pound size, I guess. But anyway, the seed catalog said 1 to 3 pounds. So I guess they have reached the size that they are supposed to reach. I've already eaten one of those, maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was delicious, a very nice squash. So I'm hoping that these will store well and I'll be able to use them, well, into the early winter anyway. If they start to wither or whatever, I then cook and freeze them. But something I'm very relieved about this year, I'm not having whatever it was that attacked my squash last year. The only thing I can compare it to is the pictures that I've seen on videos from Australia and Asia and places of the fruit fly. I don't think we have a fruit fly, but something stung all of my squash last year. It just looked like a little bruise maybe to begin with, but it just, once you stored them in the basement or wherever, they just started to spoil and rot, and I ended up, I don't know. I would salvage part of a squash and end up throwing more than half of it away. I've seen no evidence of it this year, and I'd never seen it before until last year, so whatever it was, hopefully it's gone and not coming back. And over here, those are the Japanese black futsu squash. I hope I haven't picked them too early. I watched a video that said they should get all sort of warty and even turn almost a gray color. Well, let me show you. There is some like warty stuff starting there, but I didn't want to leave them any longer. The plants have got powdery mildew. Both of those 2 squash varieties there, the golden nugget and the black futsu, both have got powdery mildew, and the plants are just dying back. And there were several smaller ones of these that the slugs had practically devoured. I just left them in the garden or threw them off into the trees anyway. So I was afraid of more damage, that I would lose more. I've also grown the Tahitian squash, which is the giant butternut type squash. Wondering whether or not it could be done in this climate. Diane Murphy sent me the seeds. I have 2 squash that I have found. I'll show you one of them. It's not too far from here. The vines are still alive and looking healthy. The squash are, I don't know, a foot long. They're not as big as these things normally get, but I'm going to let them grow until the vines get killed anyway, and then I'll just try to ripen it in the sun. Hopefully I'll get something out of it. But the reason why not the reason why I'm harvesting, I'm just about to put these in a wheelbarrow and take them up to the house. And I'll put them on the deck at the house. My grafted Asian pear tree, you may have seen it in the past. 5 different kinds of Asian pears grafted on the same tree. Small tree, the fruit wasn't all that large, but there were between 20 and 30 pears, 20 anyway. I tried one a couple of weeks ago and it just wasn't ripe enough, so today I was going to try them again. Went over to the pear tree and there is not a single pear on the tree. I don't know if that was a 2-footed thief or a 4-footed one. I've never had deer damage here. It's something that if deer found, I think they would enjoy them. They eat apples off apple trees, and these were not big. They were sort of mouth size for a deer, so I prefer to think it was a deer rather than a human that came and took all of my Asian pears. I never got to try one this year at all, but I don't want the same thing to happen to my squash, so they're moving up closer to the house. I will show you that Tahitian squash now. Well, that is one of my Tahitian squash, and I guess maybe it's a bit longer than a foot. Not showing any sign of ripening and turning that nice beige color, and I don't expect it will before the frost kills the vine here, but I'm hoping I can still ripen it later on. The other one is over in another bed. It's probably not quite that long, but it's much more slender. It's a different shape altogether, and I think it formed after this one did, so it's got even further to go in its development. Fingers crossed, Diane, that I will get a Tahitian squash to try. Well, almost a wheelbarrow full, so that's more squash than I think I can eat anyway. Not in a rush. Hopefully they store well. Well, I guess I would have to call this clip Lessons Learned in the Corn Patch. This is now, October the 3rd. I'm trying to finish this video up and get it online for this coming weekend. Before I forget it though, before I start talking about my tragedy with corn here, I have done a lot more thinking about the Asian pear tree and have gone back and inspected the tree a couple of times, and I no longer think that it was either a deer or a person taking my Asian pears. I'm blaming it now on my old nemesis, the raccoon, or maybe two large raccoons. I looked around the tree, and below the larger branches on the tree, there's a couple of smaller branches that I probably should have pruned off anyway. But one of them I think has a graft involved, so I haven't pruned it back. Both of those branches got broken off, or bent down and snapped. They're still hanging there. I'm going to prune them off. And a person taking the pears off of the tree would not have been anywhere near that area of the tree, and neither would a deer. The deer are tall enough. The tree isn't that tall. A deer could stand there and eat each pear off the tree without any problem. I think a big fat raccoon climbed the tree and got the pears, and in doing so snapped those two little branches off. So he didn't get my corn, but he got my pears this year. Now let's have a little talk about my corn here. These first ones over here are from that straight row that I planted, just some leftover transplants in the little squash patch, I guess they were in. 3 or 4 or 5 plants there. And in a straight row, something that's wind pollinated like corn is doesn't do very well, so I spent the summer shaking the plants and tapping them whenever I thought there was pollen to come down on the branches, down on the cobs, and I had fairly good pollination with these 3. These 2 will be going to the hens. Now these 2 I'm quite sure are sweet corn. I thought everything that was in that row was the pink popcorn, but those look like sweet corn to me. The pink popcorn isn't all pink, it's got some yellow in there, so I think it cross-pollinated with this. I don't know what that means for it popping, but I'm going to dry it and try anyway. Moving over, these are some of the sweet corn, and you can see the purple corn kernels in there. That's because it cross-pollinated with the pink popcorn that was in the cage with it. And these, I believe, are all pink popcorn. Ones like this, I think, were probably ones that I transplanted from seedlings, and they've had a chance to fully ripen. And these ones, I believe, are pink popcorn. They just haven't turned pink yet. And it's getting cold here. 5 degrees this morning. We're not too far away from frost, so corn's not going to develop anymore anyway. So I'm going to try drying that anyway and see if it turns pink, and then see if it actually pops. But the lesson learned with pink popcorn, I think, is it would have to be all from seedlings. If you plant it direct, sow it from seeds here, the season isn't long enough. And I don't think I'll ever plant 2 different kinds again, at least something that would be so noticeable with it cross-pollinating. And actually, a lot of these things here with practically no pollination on them, that might be pink popcorn actually, but these other ones are sweet corn. And they're from the ones that I direct seeded in the garden. So I think all the corn that I plant next year will be from transplants. But I'm going to try drying my pink popcorn, and sometime maybe in the cabin we will see if we can pop some homegrown popcorn. But I think the lesson learned here mainly is that I will plant everything from transplants next year, and definitely not two kinds that can cross-pollinate again. Well, I've rooted a couple of host tomato cuttings, and I'm going to start 2 new plants to grow under lights in the house. One large cutting and one very small one. You see that there? This had a few blossom buds on it when I clipped it off the tomato plant, and now that it's starting to bloom. But I'm going to cut a lot of that off right now before I even plant it, I guess. That's better. Roosters are happy. Host tomato has been very successful. I'll show you the plant shortly when we get back up to the house. This tiny little thing, but it has roots, so I'm sure it will do all right. This is just a mixture of composted sheep manure, the commercial variety. I don't have any sheep, and the thing called super soil that I used to grow container things in this year, potatoes, which were a failure, but I don't think it had to do with the soil. A lot of the sheep manure compost in there, and then about a third of it is the soil. Tomatoes like compost. Compost is rich in calcium, and they really appreciate that, and that also helps prevent blossom end rot. But let's go up to the house and I'll show you the host tomato and give you a little talk about them and close this thing down. Grown host tomato, I always forget to mention, or forget to think about it as being 2 plants anyway. It's actually 2 in a very large pot, and as you can see, it's in bloom again. It's quite large. Down at the base, it had lost a lot of its leaves and was starting to grow out some new foliage, if you can see that from the stems at the base there. And I thought, well, I'll cut it back. That was one of the things that came with the instructions in the seed packet, that you could cut it back and it would regrow. And before I got around to cutting it back, it went into bloom again. I wish I had counted how many tomatoes it has had on it over the summer, but well in excess of 100. And as I say, it's 2 plants, and they're small. Smaller than your average cherry tomato like that you would buy at a store or whatever, but very tasty, and I think quite a nice treat here in January or February. So I didn't get the opportunity to cut this back because it has 5 or 6 blossom clusters on it now, so perhaps after this flush of fruit I'll cut it back, and I will show you my 2 little seedlings under lights that hopefully will succeed in a future video. But while we're right here, we'll look at some of the other things that grow in my living room here next to this glass door. This rather spindly looking thing is my olive tree. It's still surviving, loses some leaves and then grows new ones. The main stem on it I don't think is a great deal different than the whip that I started with about 3 years ago, but I'm not expecting to see any great olive crop. I just always wanted to see if I could grow one. This is my very small bay laurel that I have shown you before. I've had it now for almost 2 years. Finally this summer it did grow new leaves and probably 2 or 3 inches taller, and I've actually used a leaf or 2 off of it. That's why it looks a bit lopsided, but very slow growing. This is my rosemary bush, grown from seed. I've had that at least 3 years too. Nice and compact because I just keep clipping off of it and using it. It tends to grow a bit spindly. It would like to be outside, of course, in the better sunlight, but I find that if I keep clipping it back, it just keeps coming back. So I've had it going, like I say, I'm sure for at least 3 years. And this is my Myers lemon, started from seed. Roughly 2 years ago, close to 2 years ago anyway. Doing very well. It has never lost a leaf. I think down towards the bottom I see one that's got some brown on the tip of it, so maybe it's about to start losing a few leaves. If you remember, if you were watching my videos back then, I tried numerous times to grow different citrus from seeds that I bought online and never had a single one germinate. And then someone on one of my videos commented and said, try fresh seed that have never been dried. And that's what I did. I went to the store and just happened to have Myers lemons, so I don't know how many I started. Gave a number of them away, if I remember rightly. But anyway, it is growing quite nicely. I don't know how many more years I have to wait to see it bloom. And last but not least, this is just a generic lemon. I have no idea what the variety might be. It was just a nice big lemon that I bought at a grocery store. And once again, the seed germinated very easily. It's probably 8 to 10 inches taller than the Meyer lemon, and they were started at roughly the same time. So I don't know. I've never seen either one grow in an orchard somewhere, or a grove, whatever you call it, where you grow lemons. So I don't know if one tree is naturally larger than the other or not. But it has branched out into 3 tops there. You can see them all or not. One might be behind one of the other ones, but it's a bushier plant than the Meyer lemon. Well, that includes a little update on things that are growing in the house here and the garden. I'll get this up on YouTube and should come out this Saturday. Well, thank you very much for watching.